Hey everyone, this is Dylan from Chess Lifestyle, and today I wanted to start what will hopefully be a series of conversations revolving around the overlap between philosophy and chess. I studied a little bit of philosophy, so I want to try to incorporate some of my thoughts that I've had in the past about topics that concern reality and the world outside of chess, as well as within the game itself. So today I want to talk about the concept of transposition and how that relates to our notions of time, space, and metaphysics. But in any case, I thought it would be a nice way to get out in nature and reflect on this topic, which I initially wrote about when I was living in London. So I'll start by just reading the piece, and then I'll briefly discuss it. So the all-knowing Google defines the word transpose as to cause two or more things to change place with each other, or to transfer to a different place or context. And this isn't normally what we mean when we use the word transpose or transposition in chess, and we'll get to that a little bit, but also when generally used in English, it generally has something to do with the temporal order of things. It's also used in mathematics and in English sometimes when referring to interchanging one word for another in a sentence, for example. I get the sense that this is not merely a concept applicable to chess, but to the events of daily life, if only theoretical in nature. But to transpose in life would mean for everything, or more reasonably, a localized person or entity, to occupy time, space, or brain state, or some combination of those, after at least two possible timelines containing at least one moment with different world states. But this seems contingent on many factors. Some notion of possible world realism, or at least indeterminism, and also the implication that this transpiring moment or world state is unexpected or secondary to some counterfactual way it might have arisen with a different set of antecedent events. In a game like chess with well-defined parameters, played on a grid in two dimensions, it's more straightforward to contrast ways which one position can come about. Here, we are contrasting positions in chess with world states, a particular configuration of atoms and molecules, or a precise, well-defined moment in time. Often the purpose is to analyze whether one player who has the liberty to decide whether to enter a given position, assuming they are content with the merits of the position, should choose to arrive at it through one variation or another, with concern for which variation offers them or their opponent greater chances. Outside a game scenario, it's unclear what might be the utility of such analysis, given we have no equivalent for a win condition. Although in practice, perhaps a simple goal setting, such as crossing a street, can suffice. Setting aside the issue whether it's possible or meaningful to metaphysically transpose, or to achieve an exact world state spatially, temporally, or in any other sense, it would seem to us that there is more than one way to, for example, cross a street. Compared to the first way, one could cross exactly the same way, only pausing 1 second before setting off. Disregarding mortality, there's an infinite number of ways to cross the street via temporal deviation, by virtue of the infinity of numbers of seconds one might pause before acting. But one could also move a meter towards the destination, and then pause. Because of the ability to combine modes of deviation, which already provide infinite transposition opportunities, there is a large infinity of ways to achieve a localized goal, such as crossing the street. Again, this all assumes, quite dubiously, it's possible to define a world state with perfect rigor. Now, it would be easy to confuse a transposition, which is a comparison between ways to arrive at the same state at the same moment in time, to it being comparison between ways to achieve the same world state at different moments in time. The latter is the more intuitive interpretation because of our experience of time as an ongoing, continuous, linear trajectory. The way we think about time in chess is much different, but this is for another video. Given our fixedness in time, it is impossible to know whether a true transposition is possible. Does it make sense, or is it just hand-wavy to claim that a real-life event was reached by transposition, like in an alternate way to some presumed essential way? It makes sense in a game like chess because it's atemporal. That is, chess moves are played one after the other, but this notion of position alteration is time independent. The moves in a chess game precede each other in the same abstract sense that lower numbers precede higher numbers. The order matters, but this has nothing to do with time. The question whether time is necessary for change is far too deep to tackle here, but transpositions are understood in chess due to our ability to replay games and variations within them, with a measure of exactitude we can't achieve in other modes of life. If transpositions in daily life can or do happen, I wonder how they affect us, if at all. Do we become vaguely suspicious, faintly aware of some slight upon us, similar to déjà vu? If the many worlds theory, that every possible world state exists, is true, transpositions would necessarily supply an infinite source for parallel universes. However, since transpositions by definition require sameness in time and space, perhaps the same event occurring across multiple universes would not qualify. Another difficulty is whether transpositions must arise from contextually relevant deviations, and how to objectively judge this relevance. If it's enough to say that my instance of crossing the street was transposed because a single atom across the globe was out of place, relative to the actual timeline, then we must grant any other divergence equal to or greater than this to also constitute a transposition. Most of these deviations would violate our intuition about relevance, but then the universe probably doesn't care about our brain's way of forming patterns or our ill-conceived notion of causal relevance. Perhaps the idea of transpositionality is more applicable and interesting to ponder in a fictional, non-temporal world, one in which no living being exists to experience time. I reflect on the difference between the temporal stratum we as humans inhabit in contrast to the well-defined, abstract, atemporal stratum of the game of chess. Of course, you could argue it's just semantics, what we decide to name each opening and why, and at which point in the opening has been decided for certain. But when we're talking about transpositions in the opening, this is an example of an opening which you could consider to have multiple transpositions. Starting with the ready, with knight f3, and we have this series of moves, after which, at this point, you could already say that perhaps this is already transposed into a mainline queen's pawn opening, but going a couple moves deeper, now maybe you might want to say, okay, so this is a queen's gambit declined, this is a ready transposed into a QGD, but going even a couple moves further, maybe at this point, after c6 has been played, we might establish firmly that the position is now a semi-Slav and will remain so for the rest of the game. So this is just an example of what someone might consider an opening transposition, but also just to note that it could be argued that it's slightly arbitrary and just a matter of semantics as to whether this opening was a ready or a semi-Slav. You know, because our experience is so fundamentally tied to our experience of time and space and observing the laws of physics and everything else that comes with being a conscious living being on Earth, I think positing what a life on a two-dimensional chessboard and within the game space, this sort of objective system of chess, let's say the life of a bishop, for example, it's a really cool opportunity to step outside of ourselves and come up with these fun thought experiments about what other modes of being might entail. And I think the concept of transposition is an example of this. And also, since chess comes with its own vocabulary and its own language, I think it's often useful to take vocabulary from one domain into another just to sort of test the waters and see if there's a connection to be made there, which I think there oftentimes is. So I remember writing this in a wave of inspiration, sitting on the steps of the British Museum in London. And in hindsight, to be honest, I'm not sure I buy any of it myself. Seems a little speculative, but let me know what you guys think, any of you physicists or philosophers or anyone else who has an opinion on this. Yeah, let me know if you think the concept of transposition plays a key role in our day-to-day life. All right, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's bizarre, tangential, philosophical musing. If you did, then let us know in the comments below, and see you guys next time.